Welcome to your prelims prep. We'll launch with space exploration and interplanetary missions, then explore advanced computing and quantum technology, learn about new medical breakthroughs and biotechnology, along with public health crises and environmental regulations. Finally, we'll cover earth sciences, global ords, and e-waste management, all the essential science and tech for your 2026 exam.
To the explainer, everyone. If you've been looking up at the night sky recently and wondering, what exactly is going on off-world right now? Well, you are in the perfect place. We're strapping in today for a journey through some of the most fascinating recent and upcoming space missions. We're going to break down some incredibly complex missions, but we've got a fantastic visual guide to make it all crystal clear. So, let's start with a really big question. What does the new era of space exploration actually look like? If your mind immediately jumps to that old-school Cold War-style space race, it's time to completely toss that model out the window. What's absolutely clear in today's landscape is that it's just no longer a solitary push by one or two giant governments. Instead, we're looking at this deeply interconnected, highly complex web of private companies, super ambitious entrepreneurs, and historic international partnerships. It's moving faster than ever, and the goals? Well, they've shifted from just trying to get into space to actually sustaining our presence there and solving real problems back home. Here's our flight itinerary for today. We're starting with human missions in Earth orbit, then observing our changing planet, heading out to explore the lunar South Pole, and wrapping up with asteroid sample return missions. Let's get to it. Stop number 1. Human missions in Earth orbit. Right now, low Earth orbit is experiencing this massive, rapid cadence of commercial and private spaceflight. It's largely being driven by companies like SpaceX and Axiom Space, and they are totally redefining who actually gets to be an astronaut. Take SpaceX's historic FRAM-2 mission from the spring of 2025, for example. To really grasp what makes it special, we have to talk about its flight path. Instead of orbiting around the equator, a polar orbit passes over the Earth's polar regions, traveling from north to south. It doesn't even have to cross the exact poles perfectly. Anything within 20 to 30 degrees still counts. Now, traditionally, this kind of orbit is incredibly useful for remote sensing satellites, right? Because it gives you great global coverage as the Earth literally rotates beneath it. But FRAM-2, they're doing something entirely different. FRAM-2 is actually the first ever crewed mission in a polar orbit. It's a completely private spaceflight funded and led by entrepreneur Chin Wang using a Falcon 9 rocket and the Crew Dragon capsule Resilience. For 3 to 5 days, the crew sits in this unique orbit to study the polar environment, observe auroras from above, and run microgravity experiments that focus on how spaceflight affects the human body. And honestly, I love the mission's name. It honors the famous Norwegian ship, the Fram, which was used in these legendary Arctic and Antarctic expeditions back in the 19th and 20th centuries. It's just a perfect connection between historical Earth exploration and 21st century space exploration. Okay, let's look at another monumental mission in low Earth orbit, Axiom 4, or simply AX-4. Organized by Axiom Space alongside NASA and SpaceX, this is a 14-day mission to the International Space Station, and it features an incredibly diverse crew. We've got Commander Peggy Whitson from the United States, Sławosz Uznanski from Poland, Tibor Kapu from Hungary, and Group Captain Shuhanshu Shukla from India. What is absolutely crucial to understand here is that for India, Poland, and Hungary, this marks their first government-sponsored human spaceflight mission in over 40 years. It's a massive, triumphant return to the ISS for these nations. And of course, they weren't just up there to take in the view, right? The AX-4 mission carried out more than 60 scientific studies. That includes some really specific mind-bending microgravity experiments brought on board by India's ISRO. We're talking crop growth studies, comparing microalgae activity, and looking into myogenesis, which is muscle loss in microgravity. They even took up tardigrades, those incredibly tough microscopic water bears, to see how they survive and reproduce up there. Plus, they're observing cyanobacteria for potential life support systems. It just goes to show how taking biology into space actually helps us understand life at its most fundamental level. All right, part 2, observing our changing planet. Let's zoom out slightly and look back down at Earth to see how this space tech directly benefits our daily lives. You're going to hear the acronym SAR, Synthetic Aperture Radar, quite a bit. It's a super advanced remote sensing technique. Essentially, a satellite in space pings microwave signals down to Earth and reads the bounce back. But here's the catch. A true high-resolution radar needs a massive physical antenna, which is just way too heavy to launch into space. So SAR does something brilliant. It cleverly uses the forward motion of the satellite itself to simulate, or synthesize, a giant antenna. That trick allows it to create incredibly high-resolution images of the Earth's surface. And that exact technology is the beating heart of the NISR satellite, which is this massive joint mission between NASA and ISRO. Now, what makes NISR so insanely powerful is that it's the very first dual-frequency SAR satellite. It carries an L-band radar from NASA and an S-band radar from Israel. Operating from a sun-synchronous orbit, the real game-changer is that NISR does not care if the sun is shining. It works day and night, and its microwaves slice right through clouds, heavy rain, and even dense jungle canopies to map changes on the Earth's surface with stunning precision. It is basically the ultimate all-weather monitor for our changing planet. Stop number 3, exploring the lunar South Pole. Slowing the pace down a bit, we're journeying further out to the highly contested lunar South Pole for the LUPEX mission, also known as Chandrayaan-5. Targeted for the late 2020s, this mission is a flawless division of labor between two absolute space giants. India's ISRO is bringing their proven expertise to the table by providing the lunar lander, which builds directly on their historic success with the Chandrayaan-3 soft landing. On the flip side, Japan's JAXA is stepping up to provide the lunar rover for both surface and subsurface exploration, plus all the launch support. It is a really beautiful example of international teamwork, coming together to tackle an incredibly hostile environment. But you might be wondering, why the South Pole? Well, the main objective of LUPEX is to detect and analyze water ice and volatile substances that are hiding in these permanently shadowed, freezing cold craters. If we can actually find and harvest that water ice in situ, meaning right there on site, it changes the game completely for long-term human habitation in space. Obviously, it gives us drinking water, but we can also split it to generate breathable oxygen, and most importantly, we can use it to produce rocket fuel. The moon could literally become the gas station of the solar system, making sustainable lunar bases a genuine, achievable reality. And finally, Part 4, Asteroid Sample Return Missions. Let's push our horizons way out into deep space. This brings us to China's rapidly expanding Interplanetary Exploration Program and the Tianwen-2 mission. Honestly, the best way to frame this mission is to ask one simple question. How do you catch an asteroid that thinks it's a moon? I know, it sounds like pure science fiction, but the China National Space Administration is targeting a very specific, very strange celestial body. The target in question is a small, near-Earth asteroid called Kamo Omalawa, which was discovered back in 2016. What makes Kamo Omalawa so special is its orbit. It's actually classified as a quasi-satellite. That means it officially orbits the sun, but it's locked in such a specific, tight orbital resonance with us that from Earth's perspective, it appears to be looping right around us, like a second moon. Because of this really unique relationship, scientists believe this asteroid is basically a time capsule holding untouched, vital clues about the early days of our solar system. So Tianwen-2 is designed not just to visit this quasi-satellite, but to actually rip a piece of it off and bring it back home. And the mechanical methods they're planning to use? Absolutely high stakes. The primary plan is a touch-and-go technique. Think of it as diving down, briefly making physical contact with the surface to snatch up material and immediately boosting away. But depending on what the surface conditions actually feel like once they get there, they might have to pivot to an anchor and attach method, where they physically latch onto the spinning rock to secure the sample. It is a stunning mechanical challenge out in the dead void of space. Oh, and by the way, they have a secondary objective of comet exploration right after that. So, as we look back over everything we just covered, from private citizens soaring over the poles to highly diverse ISS crews, Earth-penetrating radars, lunar water prospectors, and asteroid catchers, I want to leave you with one final thought. What does all this rapid commercialization and unprecedented international cooperation actually mean for the next decade of human history? Because the incredible, futuristic things we are learning to do out there, they are going to profoundly reshape exactly how we live, work, and survive right back here on Earth. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep your eyes on the stars and stay curious.
Welcome to this explainer. For the longest time, we kind of just thought of space exploration as firing a simple rocket up into the sky, waiting for a blip on a radar, and hoping for the best. But that era is completely behind us. Today, modern space programs have evolved into this incredibly robust, interconnected web of infrastructure. We are building an actual ecosystem up there, a continuous network of heavy lifters, commercial observers, human habitats, and deep space eyes. I'm so thrilled to guide you through these latest milestones because they prove we are now officially living in the age of mature space infrastructure. Here is our flight plan for today. We'll be looking at 4 main pillars of this maturing ecosystem. First, the heavyweight Bluebird satellite. Second, watching Earth with the Firefly constellation. Third, simulating Mars right here in Ladakh. And finally, celebrating a decade of Astrosat.
All right, diving right into Section 1, the heavyweight, the Bluebird satellite.
To really get a grip on modern space operations, we've got to talk about sheer brute force. 6,500 kilograms. That is the massive weight of the Bluebird Block 2 communication satellite, developed by AST SpaceMobile over in the US. I mean, numbers alone can be a bit dry, right? So picture this. 6,500 kilos is literally like lifting a fully grown male African elephant straight up into the sky. Or, if you prefer, imagine stacking 3 massive SUVs and just hurling them into orbit. It's wild. This isn't just your run-of-the-mill payload. It ranks among the absolute heaviest satellites India's space agency, ISRO, has ever handled. Building real infrastructure means moving massive components into the vacuum of space, and Bluebird is a magnificent leap for commercial space payloads.
So how do you actually lift an elephant-sized satellite into orbit? Well, for its December 19, 2025 launch, ISRO brought out the big guns, the LVM-3M6 rocket. This is actually the 6th operational flight for India's heaviest launch vehicle. Now, the real secret sauce here? It's the fully indigenous cryogenic engine, the CE-20. Mastering cryogenic tech is, well, it's notoriously difficult. You're dealing with supercooled liquid gases at mind-numbingly extreme temperatures just to get that massive thrust. It is the ultimate heavy lifting muscle. Thanks to this engine, the LVM-3 can push 4-ton class satellites all the way out to geosynchronous transfer orbit. By successfully lofting Bluebird, the LVM-3 is absolutely proving it's a global heavy lifting workhorse, completely ready for the booming commercial space economy.
Moving right along to Section 2, watching Earth with the Firefly constellation.
Now, consider the difference between these 2 crucial orbits. You've got geostationary orbit, which hovers completely locked over one fixed point on Earth. It's fantastic for beaming down communications or watching a specific regional weather pattern. But then, contrast that with polar orbit. It circles continuously from pole to pole, while the Earth just steadily spins right beneath it. Modern Earth observation networks, especially these new commercial constellations we're seeing deployed today, they use these low Earth or Sun-synchronous polar orbits to systematically scan the entire planet. Basically, they capture it strip by strip, day after day, until the whole globe is mapped.
And that brings us to a massive breakthrough. Enter the Firefly constellation, led by Pixel Space. Firefly is an incredible milestone because it's India's very first fully indigenous commercial Earth observation satellite constellation. What's really exciting here is that this isn't some slow-moving government project. This is agile private enterprise stepping up, backed by the regulatory framework of IN-SPICE. Honestly, it feels a lot like the massive internet tech boom of the 90s, but the frontier is up in orbit. Private companies are now operating systematically to capture the globe in unprecedented, breathtaking detail.
The absolute technological marvel making this possible is called hyperspectral imaging. Instead of just seeing the world in simple red, green, and blue like our eyes do, hyperspectral sensors capture electromagnetic data across hundreds of distinct, narrow spectral bands. So what's the big deal? Well, it lets us see hidden chemical details that are entirely invisible to the naked eye. Think about farming. Instead of just seeing that a field looks generally green, hyperspectral imaging can actually tell us the precise chemical makeup of the leaves. We can literally spot a devastating crop disease from orbit weeks before a farmer could ever see the symptoms on the ground. It is an absolute game changer for modern agriculture, tracking invisible pollution, and managing natural disasters.
Okay, let's jump into Section 3, simulating Mars in Ladakh.
Before we even think about sending humans out into the unknown, we absolutely have to test their endurance right here on Earth. So ISRO inaugurated the HOPE analog mission, which stands for Himalayan Outpost for Planetary Exploration, using the brutal, extreme terrain of Ladakh's Tsokar Valley. The extreme high altitude, the biting cold, and the totally barren isolation act as a perfect terrestrial stand-in for the incredibly hostile and alien environments of the Moon and Mars. Turns out, you don't actually need to leave Earth to find a place that actively wants to reject human life. You just need to head up into the high Himalayas.
During this mission, crews are completely isolated for 10 straight days in these extreme conditions. I mean, just imagine being locked in a highly confined space in freezing temperatures with your coworkers for a week and a half straight. It's not just a physical test. It is a profound psychological one. Scientists are actively studying intense physiological responses, like how the human body reacts to cripplingly low oxygen and the severe behavioral stress of deep isolation. And beautifully, this is a collaborative effort. ISRO's Human Spaceflight Center teamed up with private partners like Protoplanet, working together to figure out how humans can safely adapt to alien worlds.
The immediate payoff of all this intense earthly preparation is just monumental. The data they're gathering from the harsh isolation of the HOPE analog mission directly feeds into the astronaut training and precursor missions for India's deeply ambitious Gaganyaan program. All that earthly suffering in the frozen valleys of Ladakh, that's basically the direct down payment for those upcoming days in low Earth orbit. Every single bit of psychological and physical data helps guarantee that when a crew of 3 astronauts eventually steps into that module on top of an LVM-3 rocket, they are physically and mentally ironclad, fully prepared for the immense rigors of space.
Finally, we arrive at Section 4, a decade of AstroSat.
AstroSat's journey is an absolute triumph of engineering, science, and honestly, sheer mechanical stubbornness. Launched way back in September 2015 by the ever-reliable PSLV C-30 rocket, this dedicated space observatory was originally designed for just a 5-year lifespan. It was fully expected to wrap up its primary mission and retire in 2020. Yet here we are in 2025 celebrating a full, continuous decade of incredibly successful operation. It's a machine that simply refused to quit, proving to be an incredibly resilient piece of deep space infrastructure hovering 650 kilometers above our heads.
Over these past 10 years, AstroSat has operated as a true multi-wavelength powerhouse. See, older telescopes typically could only see the universe in one single type of light. But AstroSat is India's first mission capable of observing celestial sources in ultraviolet, optical, and X-ray bands, all simultaneously. This synchronized capability means it's tracking the intense X-ray radiation spewing out of the edges of black holes, while at the exact same time watching the optical light of distant galaxies forming right before our lenses. It has spent a full decade decoding the absolute highest energy mysteries of the universe, offering us a front-row seat to the incredibly dense cores of neutron stars and the violent gravity of black holes.
So, let's step back and look at the magnificent big picture. We have gone from launching a 6,500-kilogram commercial communications heavyweight on a fully indigenous cryogenic rocket to enabling private startups to conduct hyperspectral chemical scanning of the Earth's surface. We are meticulously simulating the psychological toll of Mars in the frozen valleys of Ladakh, and we have a multi-wavelength observatory that has survived twice its expected lifespan to unravel the darkest secrets of black holes. We haven't just launched rockets anymore. We have built a vast, robust, and interconnected space ecosystem. And it leaves us with one incredibly thrilling question to ponder. With all of this infrastructure firmly in place today, what impossible frontiers will be conquered next? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep your eyes on the skies.
So think about this for a second. What happens when artificial intelligence actually outgrows the Earth? Like literally outgrows our planet? When you're talking about computing multi-parameter fluid dynamics, or folding proteins at the atomic level, or running real-time global logistics, the sheer scale is staggering. The hardware required to run all of this is consuming so much power and physical space right now that the brightest minds in tech are literally looking to the stars for a solution. Meanwhile, down here on the ground, nations are waking up to a huge realization. Controlling the physical chips that power these algorithms is just as absolutely crucial as controlling the code itself.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are taking a massive deep dive into advanced computing, AI, and the global race for sovereign silicon. As you'll see, we're going to explore exactly how corporate giants like Google are tackling the massive hardware demands of the AI revolution by looking way beyond our atmosphere. And, on the flip side, how sovereign nations like India are aggressively securing their own technological future right here on the ground.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. Number 1, the AI compute race. Number 2, data centers in space. Number 3, India's silicon sovereignty. And finally, number 4, AI in every language. Let's jump right into Section 1.
Section 1. The AI compute race. The reality of modern deep learning algorithms is that they've created some really intense energy and processing bottlenecks. Traditional computers, they simply can't keep up with the sheer volume of math required to make large language models actually function. You see, a neural network doesn't process information sequentially. You run into this thing called the von Neumann bottleneck, which basically means traditional CPUs spend way too much time simply shuffling data back and forth from memory rather than actually crunching the numbers. Deep learning requires these massive parallel matrix multiplications, specifically gem operations, and they demand incredibly high memory bandwidth to function at scale. If you try to force that through a standard computer chip, the whole system just completely chokes. It needs highly specialized hardware.
Enter Google's Ironwood TPU. This is their 7th-generation tensor processing unit, and it's specifically architected from the ground up to power next-generation artificial intelligence and massive language models. Now, to keep those tensor cores constantly fed with data, it relies on high-bandwidth memory, moving information at literal terabytes per second. And pushing that kind of extreme performance means a huge thermal design power. We're talking highly advanced liquid cooling architectures just to keep the silicon from literally melting down under the stress.
And this brilliantly illustrates the difference. The defining architecture for a TPU is something called a systolic array. Instead of constantly reading and writing data to registers like a traditional CPU does, the data just flows through a massive grid of arithmetic logic units in these continuous rhythmic waves. So, your standard CPU handles tasks sequentially. A GPU has many cores for parallel computing, but the TPU, it's entirely domain-specific. Its singular purpose is high-speed tensor and matrix operations. It doesn't get bogged down by general computing tasks at all. It just crunches AI math with absolutely unmatched efficiency.
Section 2. Data centers in space. But here's the multi-billion-dollar question. What happens when our terrestrial energy grids can no longer support the massive power demands of thousands of these TPUs running 24/7?
While Google has proposed a truly sci-fi, yet very real initiative to answer exactly that. It's called Project Suncatcher. The ambitious goal here is to scale AI computation completely beyond Earth's atmosphere by developing solar-powered data centers in space. I know, it sounds like a total moonshot, but when terrestrial data centers start drawing as much power as small countries, putting them into orbit actually starts to sound incredibly practical.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the core paradox it presents. On Earth, our computing relies heavily on strained, fossil-heavy electrical grids. Space, on the other hand, offers 24/7 continuous solar irradiance without any clouds or atmospheric interference blocking the sun. Sounds perfect, right? But wait, dissipating the extreme heat of a TPU in a total vacuum is actually an enormous thermal engineering challenge. Because there's no air to carry away the heat via convection, thermal management becomes the ultimate hurdle in getting orbital computing to actually work.
So how would Project Suncatcher actually handle the massive data bottlenecks between satellites? By utilizing optical inter-satellite links, or OISL. Essentially, these satellites, which are packed with AI TPUs, use lasers to transfer high-speed data across the vacuum of space. And the physics advantage here is mind-blowing. Light actually travels about 30% faster in a vacuum than it does through our standard terrestrial fiber optic cables. That means these orbital networks could theoretically offer lower latency for long-distance global computations than the massive cables currently running along the ocean floor. No way, right? But it's true.
Section 3. India's silicon sovereignty. So while multinational corporations are looking up to the stars to solve their compute bottlenecks, sovereign nations are looking right at their own soil to ensure they aren't left behind. Because let's face it, he who controls the physical chips controls the future.
Made in India isn't just a catchy slogan, it's a critical mission for national stability and technological self-reliance. Under the massive 76,000 crore rupee Semicon India program, the country is executing a massive strategic shift. They aren't just importing finished wafers anymore, they are actively localizing fabrication nodes, assembly, testing, and packaging. This fundamentally shields their critical defense and strategic supply chains from global geopolitical choke points.
Let's move to and see how this builds out practically. You can see this evolution really clearly with the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO. Since 2009, they've relied heavily on a 16-bit processor known as the Vikram 1601. But recently, ISRO's Vikram Sarabhai Space Center and the Semiconductor Laboratory developed its massive successor, the fully indigenous, made in India, 32-bit processor, the Vikram 3201. And remember, this isn't your standard commercial silicon that goes into a smartphone. The Vikram 3201 is radiation-hardened, or rad-hard. It literally handles the navigation and stability for rockets and satellites, executing 64-bit floating-point operations to calculate ultra-precise trajectories. Beyond surviving insane temperature swings from -55 to positive 125 degrees Celsius, it has to be perfectly architected to prevent something called single-event upsets. That's where cosmic radiation literally flips a bit inside the computer from a 0 to a 1, which, as you can imagine, could cause a launch vehicle to veer violently off course. The stakes here are absolutely incredibly high.
But the push for silicon sovereignty goes way beyond just space applications. India recently unveiled Dhruva 64, developed by CDAC under their microprocessor development program. What's absolutely vital to understand here is the instruction set architecture. Druva64 heavily leverages open-source RISC-V architecture. By bypassing proprietary Western licensing agreements like ARM or x86 entirely, India proves conclusively that it has the sovereign capability to build high-performance 64-bit multi-core computing brains locally. A real game-changer for sure.
Section 4. AI in every language. We've talked about massive TPUs, laser-linked satellites, and rad-hard microprocessors. But hardware is really just the foundation. We need to connect this sovereign hardware to sovereign software.
Think about it. If AI models only understand Western languages and contexts, a massive portion of the global population is just totally left behind. This is actually a profound computational problem. Because Western large language models tokenize non-Latin scripts very poorly, they require significantly more compute power to process the exact same amount of semantic information in Hindi or Tamil compared to English. The government-supported Bharat-GNI initiative aims to solve this inefficiency directly at the architectural tokenization level, building models specifically and efficiently tailored to Indian languages.
So, the crucial point is this number right here, 22. That is the number of constitutionally recognized Indian languages the Bharat GenAI model will support. Training a multimodal, multilingual model of the staggering size requires vast, cleanly labeled datasets to essentially map low-resource languages into the exact same semantic vector space as high-resource languages like English. It is an immense engineering feat, and it's designed specifically to ensure AI development is truly inclusive.
The everyday applications here are nothing short of revolutionary. Just imagine e-governance platforms, healthcare diagnostics, real-time agricultural tools, and legal services instantly accessible to over 1 billion people in their native tongue. It's a massive, rapid deployment of technology aligned with the broader Digital India mission, designed specifically to bridge the digital divide at an unprecedented planetary scale.
So we are really witnessing a profound divergence right now. On one hand, you have corporate giants pushing compute into the cold vacuum of space, leveraging lasers and continuous solar power to feed the AI beast. On the other hand, sovereign nations are grounding their silicon, localizing fabrication, and rebuilding neural architectures from scratch to protect their culture and their security. As AI scales from orbiting satellites all the way down to our local languages, who will ultimately control the future of global compute? It's an absolutely fascinating space to watch, and we'll be right here to break it all down for you.
Welcome everyone to this explainer. Today, we're going to explore a massive intellectual whiplash. Seriously, we are standing right on the bleeding edge of a technological revolution, looking at the completely unbreakable security of tomorrow, while simultaneously crashing headfirst into the highly vulnerable, frankly messy networks of today. It's a fascinating paradox, and we are going to break the whole thing down.
You know, it really boils down to one simple but provocative question. Is your data ever truly safe? I mean, when we look to the future, we see this microscopic perfection rooted in the laws of quantum physics, a place where information is theoretically invincible. But then we snap back to reality, right? And we're faced with modern digital heists, fake satellite signals, and consumer-level fraud that literally bypasses all of our most sophisticated software.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. 1. The quest for unbreakable security. 2. Decoding quantum key distribution. 3. Amaravati, India's quantum hub. 4. Expanding reach, Starlink broadband. 5. Deception above, GPS spoofing. And finally, 6. The invisible threat, ghost pairing. Section 1. The quest for unbreakable security. Let's start with the future.
The foundation of next-generation security doesn't actually lie in more complex math, but in the mind-bending principles of physics. Quantum communication fundamentally flips how we transfer data. So instead of relying on traditional bits, your standard ones and zeros, it uses principles like quantum entanglement and quantum superposition. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't science fiction. This is a highly strategic, emerging technology being fiercely developed right now by the US, China, and the European Union for things like defense, banking, and top-tier government communications.
Moving to Section 2, Decoding Quantum Key Distribution.
So how does this actually give us unbreakable security in the real world? Well, we do this through something called quantum key distribution, or QKD. So the crucial point here is how this tech handles eavesdropping. QKD generally uses photons to transmit encryption keys over optical fiber or even just free space. It relies on the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. To put that in everyday terms, it means any attempt to intercept, measure, or even just look at the quantum information actually alters its physical state. So if a hacker tries to grab your encryption key, The key literally breaks. The intrusion is immediately detectable by everyone involved. It acts like the ultimate physics-based tamper-evident seal, giving us theoretically unbreakable encryption.
Section 3. Amaravati, India's quantum hub.
So the theory is totally bulletproof, but how do we drag this out of the lab and into reality? Well, this brilliantly illustrates India's serious commitment to doing just that. The National Quantum Mission, which was approved back in 2023, commits a massive 6,000 crore rupee budget over an 8-year period. And this mission isn't just about communication. It's aiming to scale up scientific and industrial R&D across the board. We're talking about building quantum computers with capacities up to 1,000 qubits, along with huge advancements in quantum materials and sensing.
To put this on the map, literally, the foundation stone for India's very first quantum technology park was recently laid in Amaravati. This is the planned, smart, greenfield capital city of Andhra Pradesh. The Amaravati Quantum Center aligns directly with that national quantum mission we just talked about. The ultimate goal here is to create a full ecosystem to master these next-gen technologies, supporting real-world applications in cryptography, cybersecurity, drug discovery, and even AI.
But here's where we hit a rather harsh reality check. While Amaravati and the National Quantum Mission promise this beautifully unbreakable future, we still have to survive in the present. And our expanding digital networks right now, they are incredibly vulnerable to brute force deception and simple social engineering.
Section 4. Expanding Reach, Starlink Broadband. To understand our current vulnerabilities, we first have to look at how rapidly our connectivity is exploding, and that brings us straight to satellite broadband. Because, think about it, as we connect more people, our attack surface just keeps growing. Maharashtra actually recently became the very first Indian state to sign a letter of intent with Starlink for satellite-based broadband. While traditional telecom networks struggle to reach super remote areas, Starlink uses a massive constellation of low Earth orbit, or LEO, satellites. This bridges the rural digital divide with high-speed, low-latency internet. Now, while Starlink has authorization to operate its Gen 1 constellation over India until 2030, this specific deal is still waiting on green lights from regulators like TRAI and the DOT. But the big takeaway for us is clear. Way more people and way more places are coming online than ever before.
Section 5. Deception above. GPS spoofing.
And of course, with more connectivity comes much greater risk, sometimes dropping right out of the sky. Now, what's really interesting and frankly alarming about this is the staggering scale. We are talking about GPS spoofing. This isn't just jamming a signal. This is an active cyber attack where fake global navigation satellite signals literally override the real ones, feeding completely incorrect position data to navigation systems. Recently, this exact thing was reported near the IGI airport in Delhi during extremely crucial GPS-based landing procedures. This brute force deception affected over 800 flights in November 2025 alone. It caused major runway disruptions, delays, and scary diversions. It's gotten so severe that the DGCA had to step in and issue new SOPs just so pilots can report this in real time and switch over to alternative navigation. I mean, contrast that chaotic, brute force deception with the delicate, tamper-proof quantum photons we were just geeking out over.
Which brings us to Section 6, the invisible threat, ghost pairing. Let's bring this threat out of the clouds and directly into your pocket. We need to look at a widespread consumer-level cyber fraud currently flagged by CERT-IN. This active threat campaign is called ghost pairing. Let's move through this chronologically and see how it builds. Step 1. It relies entirely on social engineering. The attacker tricks the victim into either scanning a malicious QR code or just willingly handing over an OTP. Step 2. Once they have that, they don't even bother trying to crack WhatsApp's encryption. Why would they? Instead, they exploit a completely legitimate feature, the linked devices functionality, and secretly connect the victim's account to their own device. Step 3. The heist is done. The attacker now has full, totally stealthy remote access to private chats, contacts, and media. The door is wide open for data theft, financial fraud, and impersonation.
So how in the world do you defend against a hack that bypasses security just by tricking you? Well, CERT-IN has some really practical advice for us. First off, regularly check your app settings for any unknown linked devices. That is your fastest immediate detection method. Second, for actual prevention, just strictly avoid sharing OTPs or scanning random QR codes, and please, immediately enable two-step verification on all your messaging apps. It adds a crucial layer of security that a simple tricked QR scan simply cannot bypass.
Which brings us to our final thought for today. We live in this crazy transitional era where we are simultaneously developing quantum key distribution, encryption literally rooted in the unalterable laws of the universe, while actively dealing with hackers who can hijack an airplane's navigation or silently clone your entire digital life with a single QR code. So the question we have to leave you with is this: will the theoretically unbreakable physics of tomorrow actually arrive in time and scale fast enough to outpace the highly deceptive, super adaptable cyber criminals of today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this gave you a much clearer picture of the wild digital arms race happening right now.
Hey everyone, and welcome to today's explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here because, well, we're looking at something truly monumental today. You know, for the longest time, modern medicine has been pretty reactive, right? Mostly focused on just managing symptoms after a disease has already taken hold of the body. But right now, we are living through a massive, real-time paradigm shift. We're literally moving away from just treating symptoms and stepping firmly into this incredible era of unprecedented disease prevention and, in some cases, total eradication. So if you're a focused learner who loves seeing the big picture come together, you are definitely in the right place.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover revolutionizing obesity and diabetes. Then, an unexpected defense against dementia. Third is India's dengue vaccine breakthrough, followed by a multi-stage malaria vaccine candidate. And finally, we'll wrap up with the mRNA cancer frontier. Let's get started.
Section 1. Revolutionizing Obesity and Diabetes, the GLP-1 Paradigm Shift.
Metabolic diseases are a deeply relatable, everyday challenge for millions of us. But right now, they're undergoing an absolute pharmacological revolution, and it's mostly thanks to semaglutide. Let's quickly demystify this technical-sounding acronym, GLP-1, or glucagon-like peptide 1. Basically, think of this medication as a powerful, bossy chemical messenger. It essentially mimics the natural hormones in your body, telling your system to optimize how it processes energy, secretes insulin, and regulates your appetite.
So what's actually happening under the hood? Semaglutide works by ramping up your insulin secretion and dialing down your glucagon release. And practically speaking, you just take it as a weekly injection or a tablet. But here's the real game changer. That last point. It significantly reduces major adverse cardiovascular events, or MACE. This means it isn't just about weight loss or balancing blood sugar anymore. We are actually significantly protecting high-risk patients from severe cardiovascular and kidney diseases. That right there is the pure essence of moving from symptom management to true prevention. Moving on to Section 2, Unexpected Defense Against Dementia, a surprising vaccine benefit. You know, sometimes science doesn't just invent something completely new. It actually stumbles upon powerful unintended benefits of treatments we already have. So let me ask you kind of a wild question. Can a rash vaccine actually protect your brain? I mean, it sounds a bit like science fiction, doesn't it? But researchers have found a highly surprising link between a common, really painful skin condition and the preservation of our long-term cognitive health. It all traces back to the varicella-zoster virus. Now, that sounds super technical, but it's literally just the exact same bug that causes chickenpox when you're a kid. Here's the catch, though. After you recover from chickenpox, this virus doesn't actually leave your body, it just kind of goes to sleep. It remains dormant in your nervous system for decades, only to reactivate much later in life, causing the incredibly painful blisters we know as shingles.
And here is where it all comes together so beautifully. A brand new study out of Wales has revealed that older adults who receive the shingles vaccine actually show a significantly reduced risk of developing dementia. Now, Alzheimer's and dementia are vastly complex, devastating syndromes, right? So discovering that an existing vaccine can serve as a brand new line of defense for protecting our aging brains, that is a massive, unexpected win.
All right, Section 3, India's dengue vaccine breakthrough. Dengue enters Phase 3.
We're going to escalate our narrative now to global infectious diseases that have just plagued humanity for centuries. 4. Just think about that number for a second. That number represents a massive scientific hurdle. See, there are 4 totally different serotypes of the dengue virus, Den 1, 2, 3, and 4. Historically, creating a vaccine for dengue has been incredibly frustrating because you literally have to protect against all 4 strains at once to be effective. But India's new dengue all vaccine, which has just entered Phase 3 clinical trials, does exactly that. It targets all 4 of them simultaneously.
So, dengue all is an indigenous tetravalent vaccine, meaning it hits all 4 types, developed in collaboration with the US NIH. But its biggest advantage?
It's a single-dose shot. Think about the logistics for a second. When you're rolling out a public health campaign to millions of people, a single dose simplifies the administration on a massive scale compared to multi-dose alternatives. It's a total game changer for accessibility.
Section 4. Multi-stage malaria vaccine candidate. Ad-Falcivax targets Plasmodium falciparum.
Now, dengue isn't the only mosquito-borne disease in the crosshairs today. The Indian Council of Medical Research has developed an indigenous vaccine candidate called Ad-Falcivax, and this one targets Plasmodium falciparum, which is the absolute most lethal strain of the malaria parasite. What's brilliant here is that Ad-Falcivax takes a dual-action approach. First, on the left, it targets the liver stage, actually stopping the initial infection from taking root in your body. Second, it targets the sexual stage of the parasite, preventing the host from transmitting the disease to anyone else. So this 1-2 punch doesn't just protect you, it protects your whole community, making it an absolute cornerstone for India's highly ambitious goal to completely eliminate malaria by the year 2030.
And finally, Section 5, the mRNA cancer frontier. Russia's Entromix vaccine.
So, we've moved from viral and parasitic eradication right up to the ultimate frontier of modern medicine, solid cancer tumors. Just take a second to process this number. 100%. That is the reported efficacy rate of Russia's experimental Intermix vaccine in its very early clinical trials. Now, obviously, it's crucial to remember that early trials are just the beginning, and we need vast amounts of data before this is available to the public. But seeing a number like that in the context of treating solid tumors, it's absolutely staggering.
Let's break down how this magic actually works. Enteromix is an mRNA vaccine, very similar to the breakthroughs we saw during COVID-19. Now, if you compare the two, mRNA is a lot more fragile than DNA. It requires that ultra-cold storage you see there, but its flexibility is completely unmatched. Think of mRNA as a highly adaptable instruction manual. We send this manual directly into the patient's cells to quickly teach their immune system how to recognize and destroy very specific tumor antigens. Because it's mRNA, the code can be changed incredibly fast, which leads us right into the future of personalized treatment.
What this all translates into is a truly revolutionary therapeutic approach. This treats cancer that is already there by actively enhancing your T-cell immune response, and it's personalized, or semi-personalized, directly to the patient. This really ties our entire explainer together, doesn't it? We are actively shifting from generic, one-size-fits-all treatments that merely manage symptoms to hyper-personalized, targeted eradication using your body's very own immune system. It truly is the absolute pinnacle of this medical paradigm shift.
So as we wrap up today's journey, from metabolic weight loss drugs and surprising dementia defenses to single-dose dengue vaccines, multi-stage malaria eradication, and the absolute frontier of personalized mRNA cancer therapies, I really want to leave you with this question to chew on. Which of these medical breakthroughs do you think is going to change the world first? The science we've unpacked today has immense, life-altering global impact. And honestly, we are so lucky to be watching it unfold in real time. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I'll see you in the next explainer.
Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into a high-stakes, almost invisible battle going on right now across India. We're talking about microscopic threats, stuff you can't even see, going head-to-head with some of our most advanced scientific countermeasures. From toxic chemicals hidden in the ground beneath our feet, to deadly viruses, and straight into the absolute cutting edge of genetic engineering. It's a fascinating story of how science is stepping up to meet some truly unprecedented crises. Let's get right into it.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover invisible public health threats, water contamination and amoebas, the Nipah virus menace, the biotechnology revolution, unlocking the Indian genome, and finally, gene editing for the future.
Starting off with Section 1. Invisible public health threats. Elemental dangers hiding in plain sight.
We're kicking things off in Uttar Pradesh, specifically the Sonbhadra district, where a massive silent health crisis has been unfolding. The danger here isn't loud, it's literally seeping into the groundwater. You know, the World Health Organization sets the safe limit for fluoride in drinking water at 1.5 milligrams per liter. But in Sonbhadra, the reported levels are staggering. We're talking 5 to 6 times higher than that permissible limit. Fluoride is a highly reactive element, and when it's this concentrated in the local water supply, it creates an absolute systemic nightmare for public health.
Moving right along to Section 2, water contamination and amoebas. Microscopic threats lurking in fresh water.
Now let's head down south to Kerala. Recently, the warm freshwaters there have been harboring what I can only describe as a microscopic nightmare. It's an infection called PAM, or primary amoebic meningoencephalitis. It's caused by Naegleria fowleri, which you've probably heard called the brain-eating amoeba. It thrives in warm water, like lakes and hot springs. And the terrifying part? It enters your body through the nasal passages if you happen to get untreated water up your nose. Once it travels from your nasal cavity to your brain, well, the results are absolutely devastating.
The really crucial thing to understand here is the rapid, and I mean incredibly rapid and fatal progression of these symptoms. It absolutely demands an immediate medical response. At first, it just looks like acute encephalitis syndrome. A sudden fever, headache, a bit of nausea. But then it escalates like wildfire into severe seizures, profound confusion, and tragically coma and death within a matter of days. The fatality rate is just extremely high, which makes early detection literally a matter of life and death.
While Kerala saw its first case back in 2016, things have escalated sharply. Just looking at 2024 and 2025, the state faced over 170 cases and more than 40 deaths. That is a staggering surge, likely driven by rising temperatures and just more water exposure. But here's the silver lining. This crisis forced the state to act, and they really stepped up. Kerala actually became the very first state to adopt a specialized One Health protocol and treatment SOP. Basically, this means they're integrating human, animal, and environmental health surveillance all together, along with massive public awareness campaigns telling folks, hey, avoid getting untreated water up your nose.
Section 3. The Nipah virus menace, a recurrent zoonotic threat.
Still in Kerala, districts like Kozhikode and Malappuram have become hotspots for another deadly invisible enemy. But this one strikes from the skies. I'm talking about fruit bats, or flying foxes, which act as the natural reservoir for the Nipah virus. The virus jumps from these bats to humans through direct contact, or even just eating contaminated food, like date palm sap that the bats have nibbled on. Once it's in humans, it can even spread from person to person. And it is brutal, causing intense brain swelling and seizures that can rapidly push patients right into a coma.
Since 2018, Kerala has been battling recurrent outbreaks of Nipah, and these outbreaks are so complex and honestly so fatal that local state hospitals simply can't fight them alone. They require some serious scientific firepower. That's where the National Institute of Virology, or NIV, in Pune comes in. The NIV has these highly specialized biosafety level 3 and level 4 labs. These are the intense, top-tier facilities strictly designed to safely handle the world's most high-risk pathogens, things like Nipah, Ebola, and of course COVID-19.
So, with all these grim public health crises claiming lives, from toxic elements buried in the soil, to amoebas in the lakes, to viruses in the wildlife, we've got to ask the big question: how is Indian science actually fighting back? How do we stop just reacting to these outbreaks and start engineering real solutions on a molecular level?
Which brings us to Section 4, the Biotechnology Revolution, moving from crisis to scientific empowerment.
Did you know India is actually ranked third in the entire Asia-Pacific region for biotechnology? It's true, and the tools being developed right now are nothing short of a game changer. The agency leading this charge is the Department of Biotechnology, or the DBT. Their mission is massive. They are heavily focused on mapping the very building blocks of life so they can create highly targeted interventions. We're talking major pushes in genomics, developing next-gen vaccines, transforming agriculture, and using bioinformatics to crunch through just massive, massive amounts of biological data.
Let's look closer at that in Section 5, Unlocking the Indian Genome, the blueprint of population diversity.
Think about it. To really fight diseases effectively, you have to understand the unique genetic makeup of your population first, right? Well, the Genome India project, which is led by the DBT and places like the Indian Institute of Science, has done something incredible. They've successfully sequenced the genomes of 10,000 individuals. Why is that such a huge deal? Because India's population is incredibly diverse. By mapping all of this genetic variety, scientists are laying the actual groundwork for precision medicine. Instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, we're talking about healthcare, diagnoses, and treatments customized entirely around your specific genetic code.
And finally, Section 6, Gene Editing for the Future, Rewriting Biology for Resilience.
Now, it's not just about human medicine. These exact same molecular tools are completely revolutionizing our agriculture and food security. Scientists aren't just reading DNA anymore, they are actively rewriting it. Take this major milestone, for example. The Indian Council of Agricultural Research, or ICAR, recently developed India's first gene-edited rice varieties based on the famous Samba Mahasuri strain. By using the incredibly precise CRISPR-Cas technology, they're making these crops hardier and way more productive.
And because they're using specific gene editing categories, known as SDN1 and SDN2, these crops actually face a much lower regulatory hurdle compared to older methods. It's a huge win.
But wait, it goes beyond just crops. This very same CRISPR technology was utilized by the Sher-e-Kashmir University to create India's first ever gene-edited sheep. I mean, what a fascinating scientific milestone. Basically, they went in and precisely modified a specific gene called myostatin, or MSTN, which naturally regulates muscle mass. By tweaking that one gene, they engineered a sheep with a double muscling trait, significantly boosting its muscle growth.
Okay, let me pause here, because there's a vital distinction we need to make. When you hear traditional genetically modified or GM crops, that usually involves taking foreign DNA from a totally different species and inserting it. Gene editing with CRISPR is different. It's a precise modification of the organism's existing DNA with absolutely no insertion of foreign stuff. Think of gene editing like finding a typo in an instruction manual and just erasing a letter to fix it, rather than tearing out a page from a completely different book and gluing it in. That's exactly why these new rice varieties and our double-muscled sheep are classified as gene-edited, not transgenic. So we've covered a lot of ground. We've seen how vulnerabilities in our environment, whether it's toxic fluoride hidden in the water, the terrifying brain-eating amoeba, or the Nipah virus dropping from the sky, can absolutely devastate communities. But on the flip side, we've also seen how the Department of Biotechnology and institutions across India are fighting back, using genomics and CRISPR to map and literally edit the code of life. As these scientific capabilities rapidly evolve, transforming our medicine and our agriculture, it really leaves you wondering, with these incredible precision tools now in our hands, what massive invisible public health threat will Indian science conquer next? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep questioning the science around you. Let's jump right into this explainer and decode the recent health regulations that are quietly protecting you literally every single day. We so often think of health just in terms of diet, working out, or going to the doctor when we're already sick. But there's actually an entire massive architecture of policies working totally behind the scenes to keep us safe. Today, we're exploring those invisible shields.
I mean, think about it. From toxic spices hiding right there in your pantry to the artificial intelligence diagnosing your diseases, how exactly are the rules of your health changing? I want you to consider how these seemingly abstract government policies act as a literal, invisible shield for your daily life. They dictate what goes into your body, how much your habits cost, and whether your medicines will actually work when you really need them.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We're looking at the poison in your food, taxing our unhealthy habits, fighting the superbug threat, the One Health approach, and finally, regulating AI in medicine.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the poison in your food, exposing Auramine O. Okay, so Auramine O. This is a synthetic yellow dye that is strictly meant for the textiles and paper industries. But it's being illegally added to enhance the color of everyday food items, things like turmeric, pulses, and street food. It's crazy, right? This cheap coloring alternative meant for industrial fabrics is definitely not meant to be mixed into your turmeric just to make it look a little brighter.
And why does this matter to us? Well, Auramine O is highly toxic to the human body. It is directly linked to severe liver damage and possesses known carcinogenic or cancer-causing effects. Seriously, go check your pantry, because the highly vulnerable items for this kind of adulteration include your common turmeric powder, sweets, and those bright fried snacks you might pick up on the street. It's a severe health issue masquerading as fresh food.
And that brings us to our very first shield, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, or FSSI. Functioning under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, they're tasked with regulating and overseeing food safety standards. They explicitly ban toxic dyes like Auramine O, and they are actively out there working to detect these chemicals through inspections to protect consumers like you and me. Moving on to Section 2, taxing our unhealthy habits, and the WHO 3x35 initiative. Greater than or equal to 50%. The World Health Organization launched this 3x35 initiative with a highly specific, very aggressive target. They want to increase the real prices of harmful products, specifically tobacco, alcohol, and sugary drinks, by at least 50% by the year 2035. And the main weapon they're using to make this happen? Higher taxes. $1 trillion. The crucial point here is that by curbing the consumption of these unhealthy products through higher prices, the WHO also plans to mobilize a staggering $1 trillion globally over the next decade. Because official development assistance is actually declining, this massive pool of sustainable domestic revenue is intended to finance global health and sustainable development goals. It's hitting two birds with one stone.
Bringing this massive global policy down to a local reality,
India is already stepping up as a shield by heavily taxing unhealthy habits. Just look at how this breaks down. Aerated beverages are hit with a massive 28% GST, plus an additional 12% compensation cess. Meanwhile, high-fat, sugar, and salt foods, often called HFSS foods, are taxed at a 12% GST rate. This is the 3x35 logic already playing out right there in your local grocery store checkout line.
All right, Section 3, Fighting the Superbug Threat, NAPAMR 2.0.
What happens when our medicines simply stop working? I really want you to pose this alarming scenario to yourself. This is the terrifying reality of antimicrobial resistance, or AMR. It's a situation where microbes naturally evolve to resist the very antibiotics that were designed to kill them. It basically turns routine infections into potential death sentences.
To combat this, India's strategic shield has been evolving. The first National Action Plan on Antimicrobial Resistance was launched back in 2017. Now, building on that to address implementation gaps, the Union Health Ministry released NAPAMR 2.0 in 2025. This is a highly focused, 5-year strategy running until 2029 to ensure our antibiotics actually keep working.
So how does this shield actually work in practice? Well, the National Center for Disease Control, or NCDC, is leading the charge here. They're enforcing the rational use of antibiotics, which means we have to stop overprescribing them. They're also strengthening infection prevention, upgrading laboratory capacities for genomic surveillance, and advancing rapid diagnostics. It's a massive, coordinated effort spanning the health, agriculture, and environmental sectors all at once.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 4, the One Health approach and our interconnected biosphere.
Frame this simply in your mind. You cannot have healthy humans if the animals and the environment around them are sick. The One Health approach integrates human, animal, and environmental health right at their interface. We absolutely must stop looking at human health in a vacuum and start treating the whole, interconnected planet as a single patient.
This interconnected approach is our absolute best defense. It's a collaborative, multi-sectoral strategy backed by global powerhouses like the WHO and the Food and Agricultural Organization. Operating at that crucial human-animal-environment interface is exactly how we address major zoonotic diseases. You know, the ones that leap from animals to humans, like COVID-19 or avian influenza. And right here in India, this shield is actively promoted through the National One Health mission.
Finally, let's zoom out to Section 5, Regulating AI in Medicine, the Digital Frontier.
The Health AI Global Regulatory Network. Because health regulation isn't just about banning toxic chemicals in spices or monitoring microscopic superbugs anymore. As our healthcare systems digitize, regulation is increasingly about policing the digital realm of artificial intelligence. If an AI is diagnosing your illness, you want to be absolutely sure it's making the right call, right?
So, what is India doing about it? By teaming up with international leaders, India is building a massive digital shield. India actually joined the Health AI Global Regulatory Network, collaborating with countries like the UK and Singapore. Domestically, this whole effort is led by India AI and the ICMR's National Institute for Research in Digital Health and Data Science. Their primary aim is to guarantee that the AI analyzing your sensitive health data or predicting your medical outcomes remains completely safe, ethical, and rigorously effective. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. As these invisible shields continue to evolve, from banning toxic spices on our dinner plates to taxing our sodas, preventing global superbugs, and even regulating global medical AI, ask yourself, are you ready for the new rules of your health? These policies are working constantly in the background to protect you. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.
Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going on an absolutely mind-bending journey of scale today, exploring 4 massive scientific and technological breakthroughs that are mapping the invisible forces shaping our world. We're going to travel from the incredibly tiny atomic level all the way out to the immense, violent collisions of the deep cosmos, looking specifically at how research and strategic initiatives are totally pushing the boundaries of what we know. Here's the game plan for today. First, the subatomic magnetic frontier. Second, India's rare earth crisis. Third, predicting our planetary weather. And finally, cosmic ripples in space-time.
All right, Section 1, the subatomic magnetic frontier, decoding ultramagnets.
So to really get why this new breakthrough from the SN Bose National Center is such a huge deal, we kind of need to look at the old rules of physics. For the longest time, magnets basically fell into two main camps. You got your ferromagnets. These have parallel atomic spins, creating a strong net magnetization. You know, the classic magnets holding up your grocery list on the fridge. Then you've got antiferromagnets. In these guys, the atomic spins are antiparallel. They basically cancel each other out, which means zero net magnetization and practically no reaction to an outside magnetic field. But wait, scientists have just identified a brand new third class called ultramagnetism. And honestly, it's brilliant. It totally bridges the gap between those two traditional camps. Ultramagnets have zero net magnetization, just like the antiferromagnets, but at the exact same time, they have spin-split electronic states, which is a classic ferromagnet feature. Blending these two was literally considered a physics paradox for years, but they essentially take the best of both worlds, giving us this wild, unconventional magnetic behavior thanks to their unique alternating symmetry. The star player in this research is a binary compound called chromium antimonide, or CRSB for short. It's got this specific gneiss-type crystal structure made of, you guessed it, chromium and antimony. And it's this exact intermetallic compound that actually shows off these super rare ultramagnetic properties. Because of how its atoms are arranged in this alternating pattern, electrons can flow through it with completely distinct spin states, even if there's no overall magnetic field around. It's just doing its own thing. Okay, so what's the big so what here? Why does this actually matter for us? Well, because ultramagnets like chromium antimonide don't leak any stray magnetic fields, they are an absolute game changer for next-gen tech. Zero stray fields means you can pack miniaturized devices incredibly close together without them messing with each other. We are talking about insanely energy-efficient spintronics. Imagine a laptop that literally never gets hot on your lap, or a smartphone that you only have to charge like once a week. It's a massive leap forward for high-density data storage. Moving on to Section 2. India's rare earth crisis, geopolitics and industry. Zooming out from subatomic electrons to the human scale, we run into a really fascinating, kind of frustrating contradiction. Think about all that advanced tech we were just talking about. Why is India staring down a massive shortage of the permanent magnets needed to build that tech, when the raw rare earth elements are literally sitting right under our feet? Elements like neodymium and dysprosium are absolutely crucial, and India actually has massive reserves of them locked up in the monazite sands down in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Odisha. The catch? The problem isn't the natural resource itself, it's the industrial capability. There's a severe lack of domestic processing and refining capacity. Because of that, India relies heavily on China for both the supply and the really complex processing of these rare earths. And you know, the stakes here are incredibly high. We aren't just talking about making smartphones. This bottleneck holds the entire electric vehicle revolution, wind turbine production, and even super-sensitive strategic defense systems completely hostage. It makes these critical sectors incredibly vulnerable to geopolitical tensions and sudden export controls. To counter this, the government has launched a really smart, two-pronged defense. First up is the PLI scheme, or Production-Linked Incentive. This throws financial backing behind domestic manufacturing, essentially paying companies based on incremental production to aggressively build up our own EV and electronics factories. Then you have the critical mineral strategy, run by the Ministry of Mines. This one looks upstream. It targets the mining and refining stages long before anything hits a factory floor. We're talking domestic exploration, recycling, and even overseas acquisitions, literally buying stakes in foreign mines just to secure the raw supply of lithium, cobalt, and neodymium right at the source. All right, Section 3, predicting our planetary weather. The Bharat Forecast System. Let's zoom way out again, right, up to the planetary scale, to see how India is mapping the absolute chaos of Earth's atmosphere. Get this number, 6 kilometers. That is the incredibly precise, high-definition grid resolution of the newly operationalized Bharat forecasting system. To put that into perspective, the standard resolutions for global models in places like the US or the UK usually sit way wider, around the 9 to 14 kilometer mark. So for the everyday person, that 6-kilometer precision is the difference between a model saying it might rain in your county today versus knowing exactly if your specific neighborhood or a local farm is about to get hit by a massive downpour. And this breakthrough didn't just happen in a vacuum. It's the result of this amazing synergy between two heavy hitters under the Ministry of Earth Sciences. First, you've got the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, the IITM, over in Pune. They're the research hub that actually built this incredible numerical weather prediction model using absolute state-of-the-art supercomputers. I mean, the sheer math required to model the atmosphere's chaos at 6 kilometers is just mind-blowing. Then you have the India Meteorological Department, the IMD in New Delhi. They've been around since 1875, and they're the operational muscle. They took IITM's supercomputing model and actually put it to work for daily forecasting, giving us vastly sharper predictions for monsoons and high-impact extreme weather events like cyclones.
And finally, Section 4, Cosmic Ripples in Space-Time, the GW2311-23 merger.
For our final jump in scale, we are leaving Earth completely behind. We're looking out into the deep cosmos at an event for November 2023 that literally shook the universe. Picture this, a black hole that is an absolutely staggering 225 times the mass of our own sun. It's almost too big to wrap your head around. That is the single, mind-bogglingly massive black hole created during the GW2311-23 merger. It is officially the largest black hole merger we have ever detected. Now, when the two massive precursor black holes slammed into each other, they didn't just flash some light. I mean, nothing escapes a black hole, right? Instead, the pure, unadulterated violence of that collision actually warped reality itself. It sent gravitational waves, literal ripples in the fabric of space-time, shooting across the universe at the speed of light. It's wild to think about, but this monumental collision directly confirms exactly what Albert Einstein predicted way back in 1915 with his general theory of relativity, just proving, yet again, how fundamentally weird and stretchy our universe really is. But here is the real kicker, the thing that's totally bending the minds of the astrophysicists at the LIGO-Virgo-Kroger collaboration. It's not just that this black hole is huge, it's that it sits perfectly inside what scientists call the mass gap. You see, standard physics says that stars of a certain massive size aren't supposed to just quietly collapse into black holes. They're supposed to get so incredibly hot that they trigger a runaway reaction and blow themselves completely to pieces in a supernova, leaving absolutely zero trace behind. So, a black hole of this exact specific mass literally shouldn't exist. Its discovery is sending shockwaves through the scientific community, forcing them to totally rewrite the textbooks on how stars evolve and die. And wow, that brings our journey full circle, doesn't it? We have scaled all the way from the microscopic, invisible spin of electrons inside an ultramagnet like chromium antimonide, straight out to the massive space-time-bending gravitational ripples of deep space. We've seen exactly why tracking planetary weather at a hyperlocal 6-kilometer resolution and aggressively securing our rare Earth supply chains are absolutely crucial for navigating the future. It's a lot to take in, but it leaves us with one incredibly thrilling question to ponder. With science and technology accelerating at this breakneck pace, what hidden reality will we decode tomorrow? Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, if you're a focused learner ready to decode the absolute biggest leaps in science and technology right now, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're unpacking some truly mind-bending material. Specifically, we're looking at the groundbreaking 2025 Nobel Prizes and a massive new environmental policy that will literally track the footprint of our green future. So think about this for a second. What do autoimmune diseases, quantum physics, and your next electric car actually have in common? It kind of sounds like the setup to a weird joke, right? But the answer is actually thrilling. They represent humanity tackling our most existential challenges. We're scaling all the way from the microscopic mechanisms inside our own bodies right up to the macroscopic environmental policies that are shaping entire nations. Here is our roadmap for today. Number 1, medicine and taming the immune system. 2, physics and quantum tunneling. 3, chemistry and chemical sponges. And 4, the BPN policy for tracking EV waste. Let's just dive right in. Section 1, medicine, taming the immune system to solve the threat of autoimmune diseases. The 2025 Nobel Prize in Medicine went to discoveries about how our bodies literally stop attacking themselves. It's a concept known as peripheral immune tolerance. Basically, this is your body's frontline defense. It prevents your immune system from going rogue and attacking your own healthy cells, or self-antigens, when they're outside the primary lymphoid organs. And when this incredible mechanism fails, the results are devastating autoimmune diseases, like type 1 diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis. So how does the body actually enforce this tolerance? And that brings us to the absolute stars of the show, regulatory T cells, or, TREGs for short. Think of these guys as the elite peacekeepers of your immune system. The Nobel laureates discovered that these TREGs are a really specific subset of CD4 plus T lymphocytes. Crucially, they're marked by a transcription factor called FOXP3, which is just absolutely essential for them to develop and function. When your immune system gets a little too aggressive and starts threatening healthy tissue, these peacekeepers step right in to suppress that overactive response. They pull off this complete immune homeostasis through direct cell contact and by secreting inhibitory cytokines, specifically IL-10 and TGF-beta. It's this perfect, microscopic balancing act, keeping you healthy right at this very second. All right, Section 2, Physics. Macroscopic quantum tunneling and breaking classical energy barriers. Okay, so the 2025 Physics Nobel Prize proves something wild. They show that the bizarre microscopic rules of quantum mechanics actually apply to macroscopic systems. It brilliantly illustrates a phenomenon known as macroscopic quantum tunneling. See, in classical physics, an electrical current requires a specific physical amount of energy to climb over an energy barrier. Think of it like physically rolling a heavy ball over a hill. But under quantum rules, current or magnetic flux just passes straight through the energy barrier, completely ignoring that classical energy requirement. The ball just tunnels right through the hill. It's rooted in the mind-bending principles of wave-particle duality, but these scientists proved it can happen on a scale we can actually engineer. So how did they actually prove this? Well, the laureates demonstrated energy quantization in electric circuits. They proved that energy in these specific circuits doesn't just flow in continuous values, like water pouring out of a tap, but rather it exists in discrete, measurable levels or steps. They managed this by extending quantum effects to macroscopic systems using superconducting circuits, and this relied specifically on a highly specialized component known as the Josephson junction. This is a real game changer. It completely rewrites the rulebook on how we can build highly advanced zero-loss electronics moving forward. Moving on to Section 3. Chemistry. Metal-organic frameworks and engineering chemical sponges. The 2025 Chemistry Nobel was awarded for an unbelievably elegant structural solution to some of our biggest environmental threats. We're talking about metal-organic frameworks, or MOFs. You can think of them as chemical sponges. They are crystalline porous materials, and they're synthesized using the principles of coordination chemistry, essentially by linking metal ions or clusters together with organic ligands. This neat trick allows chemists to build incredibly complex 3D frameworks. What makes them so amazing is their structure. They boast an extremely high surface area and perfectly tunable pore sizes. Imagine a microscopic sponge where you literally get to dictate the exact size and shape of every single hole. And here is why this matters so much for you and me. Because these MOFs are highly porous and totally tunable, they can act as a targeted trap for specific gases. We're talking about the unprecedented ability to capture and store carbon dioxide. That makes these MOFs a direct, incredibly powerful tool in our fight to mitigate climate change. It is literally atomic engineering deployed for planetary survival. Finally, Section 4, BPAN, tracking EV battery waste to secure our macroscopic environment. Now, zooming all the way out to the national level, India is putting forward a really rigorous policy to handle the massive explosion in electric vehicles. Under the Battery Waste Management Rules of 2022, the Central Pollution Control Board, or CPCB, is aggressively enforcing an extended producer responsibility mandate. This covers EV, portable, automotive, and industrial batteries. And crucially, these rules strictly prohibit the landfilling and incineration of these batteries. You absolutely cannot just throw them in the trash. But how does a massive country actually enforce that on a national scale? The answer is BPAN. That stands for the Battery Pack Aadhaar Number. This policy creates end-to-end lifecycle traceability by giving every single battery pack a unique digital identity. It's a 4-step process. At step 1, right during manufacturing, a digital BPAN ID is assigned. This ID literally follows the battery through its entire life. It ensures step 2, the collection when it's used up, step 3, proper recycling processes, and finally step 4, the reuse of those critical battery materials. It guarantees an end-to-end circular life cycle, making absolutely sure that producers are held accountable and our environment stays free of toxic waste. So we've journeyed all the way from microscopic peacekeeper T-cells maintaining order in your blood, through barrier-breaking quantum circuits and carbon-capturing sponges, right up to a digital passport for the electric vehicle sitting in your driveway. I want to leave you with this provocative thought. How will these microscopic breakthroughs and macroscopic green policies reshape your daily life over the next decade? The science of 2025 is already drawing the blueprint for our future.
Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, stay focused, and I'll see you in the next one.